Have you ever wondered what would happen if the sun just went supernova right now? In this video, we're going to look at what would happen in the immediate aftermath, as well as the long-term effects on our solar system and planet. Let's get started. So, the first thing we need to clarify is that the sun won't go supernova. It's not big enough. The energy from the explosion itself wouldn't affect us because space is a vacuum. You see, one of the main reasons we know that the sun is a ball of burning plasma is because it emits light and heat. If it disappeared instantly, then nothing would change at first. We'd continue to orbit around the spot where the sun used to be, and everything would seem normal for about 8 minutes, the amount of time it takes for the light from the sun to reach us. But then we'd notice that it's getting dark. But unlike before, we wouldn't get burnt up when the sun hit. That's because the sun wouldn't be shining. The explosion would happen as the sun collapsed in on itself. The entire solar system would be vaporized in an instant. Not even Mercury, which is the closest planet to the sun, would be spared. Everything would be blasted away into deep space. It would be completely black. And since it would be completely dark, we could look directly at it. If we did, we would see a ball of glowing plasma slowly getting smaller and smaller. What do you think would be the most fun way for the sun to die? Would you rather it went out like a candle or exploded like a firework? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And also check out these other videos where I explore similar questions. What would happen if Jupiter took the sun's place in our solar system? Or what would happen if a neutron star flew past the Earth? Thanks for watching. Eventually, it would become too cold to emit any light at all, and the faint glow would turn into a brilliant flash as the sun went out like a candle being blown out. And as night turns to day, we'd realize that the sun ain't coming back. Since the sun makes up 99.8% of the mass of our solar system, it has an enormous gravitational pull. In this case, the explosion would be more like a fire that slowly burns down rather than a bomb that suddenly detonates. As the sun got dimmer and dimmer, the Earth would slowly freeze over. The oceans would freeze over, the ice caps would grow larger, and the poles would become the last places on Earth to remain unfrozen. It keeps all the planets in their natural orbits around it. Without that gravitational pull, the planets would fly off in a straight line tangent to their old orbital paths. So, if the sun disappeared instantly, we'd have about 8 minutes to say goodbye to our nice warm planet before freezing to death. Without the sun's radiation, our planet couldn't sustain life as we know it. Instead, it takes a whole year for its light and heat to fade away. Maybe the sun doesn't explode or vanish, but instead goes dark in an instant. What if the sun suddenly turned off? If this happened, we'd immediately notice that it was getting darker. And if we looked closely, we might even see a faint glow coming from the surface of the sun. That's because the sun's core is so hot that it would take several months for the core to cool down, and during that time, it would emit a faint glow as it slowly began to cool off. Well, during that year, people would start to panic. Even though the sun would still be there, it would appear to be getting smaller and dimmer every day. And they'd have good reason to be scared. As the sun gets dimmer, the Earth would gradually begin to freeze. Temperatures would drop to the point where water can no longer exist in its liquid form. Oceans would freeze over and ice would start to creep closer and closer to the equator. Plants would die and global food shortages would ensue. People would desperately try to stay warm in the face of certain death, and the world as we know it would end. In fact, without the sun, Earth would freeze over in less than a day. So, what would happen if the sun suddenly vanished? There's no air or matter for the energy to interact with, so it would pass right through us. However, the explosion would cause a tsunami of plasma to radiate outward from the sun. This radiation would eventually reach us and cause our atmosphere to heat up dramatically. So, if you were outside, you'd probably get burnt to a crisp. If you were inside, you'd likely be blinded by the flash and maybe suffer some third-degree burns. A supernova happens when a star runs out of hydrogen fuel in its core and collapses under its own gravity. This collapse causes an explosion that blasts the outer layers of the star into space. When we talk about stars that go supernova, we're talking about massive stars, many times bigger than our sun. So don't worry, the sun won't explode, but we can still have some fun with this hypothetical. Let's imagine that for whatever reason, the sun magically explodes right now. The good news is that our solar system is pretty big. The average distance from the sun to the planets is 150 million kilometers. So even if the sun exploded instantly, it would take the light from that explosion around 8 minutes to reach us here on Earth. In fact, that's exactly how long it takes for the light from the sun to reach us right now. So while the rest of the solar system would be obliterated in an instant, we'd have at least 8 minutes to prepare for impact. But what would that impact actually feel like? Unfortunately, it wouldn't feel like much. But after that, things would get really weird. Well, it depends on how suddenly it vanishes. But let's assume that the sun doesn't disappear instantly. However, there's another possibility. Now, just like before, we'd have about 8 minutes to prepare for impact. If the sun went dark and the explosion didn't happen right away, we'd still have a bit more time to prepare. And then there's the scenario where the sun gradually dims over the course of a year. All of these scenarios are highly unlikely, but it's always fun to think about what would happen in these situations.